With joy and happiness here on 90.9 FM, Radio Baha'i. Streaming at radiobaha'i.us.
Sending you love, peace, and unity. This is 90.9 FM, Radio Baha'i, WLGI, streaming at radiobaha'i.us. It is yours truly, TJ Jones, and I have a special guest with me. It's always a pleasure to talk to her. I think it might be maybe our third time talking to each other. But she's here to talk to us a little bit about the Black History Month program that's going on at the Community Center in Florence. And also she's talking to us about her book, ladies and gentlemen, Miss Annette Reynolds. Miss Annette, how you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being here. Like I said, it's always a pleasure talking with you. We always, always have a good time and really cover some really important things every time we get together. So thank you so much for your time. But I want to go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and start with your book. It's called Trudy and the Baha'i Spiritual Path in South Carolina. Can you give us a little bit of the story behind the book? What inspired you to write the book, and what was the influence? Where did that come from?
Well, I was going to create a scrapbook for Trudy White.
Right.
Now, Trudy White was raised in Salt Lake City, married, moved to Los Angeles in 1972. She and her family moved to South Carolina to help the Baha'is in South Carolina because there were a lot of Baha'is in South Carolina at that time. Trudy and I became very close when we both lived in Charleston, and she developed Alzheimer's. So I was going to develop a scrapbook for her because of her Alzheimer's, so she could have these memories.
Right.
And so I sent out, I asked Baha'is to send me memories of Trudy. And this is going to be a scrapbook. Well, the scrapbook turned into a book.
Hey, that's how it always goes, though. You always start off like maybe trying to do something small, and then you start to get inspired to do other things. And, it's amazing how you just basically started off just trying to do something for your friend, and it just turned into this. But, being inspired by Miss Trudy, to write the book, what kind of things could people find like inside of the book? I know he talks about like history of Baha'is in South Carolina. Can you talk to us a little bit maybe about one or two that that you kind of referenced in your book?
I referenced so many. In fact, about 99 people responded to tell me memories of Trudy. So one of the things was Dr. Alberta Dees. There was a rapid growth of the Baha'i Faith in South Carolina in the late 60s and early 70s, and that growth started at Dr. Dees' house in Adams Run. She heard about the faith in Alabama, and she came home to Adams Run and taught her family. And then we have a publication for the Baha'is, and in the American Baha'i, there was an article in December '69 that said there were 19 declarations in 36 hours in her home in Adams Run. Wow. So that was the beginning of a lot of people becoming Baha'is. In 1970, 8,000 people became Baha'is in South Carolina. Wow. And this is why in '72, Trudy came to South Carolina. And a lot of people, African Americans included, came to South Carolina because there were so many Baha'is suddenly in South Carolina. So the faith is growing much faster in South Carolina than it was in other parts of the United States.
Yeah, it seemed like it had a really huge boom. And you mentioned Dr. Alberta Deeds. It's funny you say that. Radio Baha'i is celebrating their 40th anniversary this year, and Dr. Deeds was very instrumental at getting the radio station started here. So, I mean, her fingerprints are all over South Carolina, and we're definitely appreciative to Dr. Dees and everything she did as far as like helping this station get started. She definitely was one of the fire starters to get this thing done. I mean, the station was a concept for many years, but she was one of the people that got it moving. But I want to talk to you a little bit about, African Americans and the Baha'i in South Carolina. let's start with you. I mean, so you grew up in Darlington, South Carolina. All right, so I assume like during that time, South Carolina, it was a racial hotbed at the time. So what encouraged you to become a Baha'i, in South Carolina? Did you grow up in, a different, studying a different religion or different background? And, once you decided to do that, did you get any, backlash as far as from your family or anything like that when you decided to become a Baha'i?
Now, you just asked about 5 questions.
Okay, all right. So
I'm going to see if I can answer all 5 of those questions. Yes, I did grow up in the Methodist Church.
Okay.
My grandfather, who lived next door to me, my grandparents on my father's side lived next door.
Okay.
And my grandfather was a Methodist preacher.
Okay.
So I was raised in the church. Anyone who was raised in the church went to choir practice on Thursday night and usher board on Tuesday night and prayer meeting on Wednesday night.
Right.
Methodist Youth Fellowship on Saturday.
Right. Cleaned up the church.
Absolutely.
Right.
So I grew up Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And I met some Baha'is when I was an adult. Right after I got out of college, I was living in Walterboro, South Carolina, where I met some Baha'is. And they gave me some books to read. I don't remember the names of the books. But as I'm reading these books, I thought the books were telling me that Baha'u'llah, who is the prophet founder of the Baha'i Faith, was the return of the Christ-like spirit. Well, I'm a Christian, so if this person is who he says he is, then I need to investigate.
Right.
And I do believe that now. And I was also impressed with 2 other things. One was the unity of the people in the faith who were of diverse backgrounds, every background you can think of around the world, and the idea of progressive revelation. Because when I was 12, I wanted to know what happened to all the people who were on earth before Christ was born, or all the people who were here even before he declared his mission.
Right.
I mean, God wouldn't leave these people out.
Right.
And all the people who never knew Christ because they were not in the Holy Land.
Right.
I mean, the Baha'is had an answer for that question. The church did not.
Right.
And the answer was progressive revelation, that God sends messengers to teach us from the beginning of the world all the way to whenever the world ends.
Right.
And Christ is arguably, of course, a very important one of those people. And Baha'u'llah is his return and Christ, a Christ spirit. So those 2 things just impressed me.
Right.
Yes, I did get some backlash from my father, who was very upset with me. But my mom said as long as I was in a group of people or participating and knew that there was a God, she was okay with that.
Yeah.
There's more than one way to reach God.
Right.
So my path is through the Baha'i Faith. And if any Christian's path is through Christ, that's wonderful. We have to be, I think, more open and more accepting, because there are people who have still maybe not heard of Christ, but they heard of Muhammad maybe, or they heard of Buddha. I mean, now we know about a number of world religions, but there was a time when we didn't have all these technical things that you've been talking about that everybody's involved in. And so we know a lot more now about a lot of things, including religion. And religion is supposed to bring people together.
Right.
It's not supposed to separate people. If it's separating people, then it's not true religion.
Yeah. I mean, I know just growing up in a Baptist church and, also being here, with Baha'is. I mean, I'm actually Baptist. I mean, so one thing that I was taught growing up was, that was the only religion that matters, right? And sometimes, like, I just feel like when you see someone of a different background or they come from a different place, they like, oh, don't listen to them, don't say anything. But you have to learn, like, and respect other people's, like, religions and ways of, getting together in fellowship. And what I like mostly about the Baha'i Faith, it doesn't matter, like, your background, doesn't matter where you come from. Just want to, get together in fellowship and talk about, the oneness of humanity and equality and things that really hold true to people, and that's really valuable. And you talked about like some of the backlash like from your dad, but I know like having a relatively new religion in South Carolina when this is the Bible Belt. So so during that time, like, did you all experience like any type of retaliation for your beliefs?
I have not experienced any retaliation, as you've put it. However, as so many people were coming into the faith, it was a very dangerous time for people. The stories in the book, one of them, they did a project in Dillon, South Carolina, and they were going to teach people, let people know about the faith in a 30-mile radius of Dillon. And as they did that, they had policemen, cars riding by and watching them. And one of the chiropractors that lived in Dillon had an office, and when he opened his office, most doctors' offices and any offices actually were segregated. Well, part of his story is he couldn't do a segregated office. He couldn't manage his patients and do a segregated office. And he said, not only were they segregated black and white, they were segregated by Native Americans too, so that you had 3 offices, a black one, a white one, and a Native American one.
Wow.
And he just decided he wasn't going to do that, and said to his patients, everybody's welcome in the waiting room. If you cannot wait in the waiting room, I'll set some chairs outside. And so, yes, he had a thriving practice, but there were problems, I'm assuming, all over the state with in a number of areas as the Baha'is tried to practice their faith. I remember Ernie telling a story that the Institute got more accepted after Hugo because Baha'is from around the world sent supplies, and those supplies were given away.
Right.
And so we became a good neighbor after Hugo. Now, Hugo happened in 1989. So my book talks about the Baha'i Faith from the late 60s up until 2010 and shows that things got better race-wise. And things have gotten better race-wise.
Yeah.
In America and in the world.
Right.
We just, we come a long way, and we got a long way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but I guess, it just takes like time in order for people to like realize that, I mean, we're all one people, like we all trying to aspire to be better people, at least we hope. And, I think that's extremely important, that the Baha'i Faith was, instrumental in helping a lot of people. And I remember Mr. Ernie Hilton, here he's the operations coordinator. He tells me stories like all the time, about, the Louis Gregory Institute. Can you tell us a little bit about, Louis Gregory? I know you mentioned him as well in your book, and how important he was to the Baha'i Faith in South Carolina.
Yes, Louis Gregory was born in 1874 in Charleston, South Carolina, and embraced the faith in 1909. His mother was freed at the age of 14 from the Dargan plantation in Darlington, South Carolina, and the family moved to Charleston for better opportunities. Of course, I got to bring out Darlington because I'm from Darlington. He earned his law degree from Howard in 1902 and closed his office and dedicated his life to fostering race unity in America. His teaching trips included Richmond, Virginia, Durham, Charleston, Macon, and many trips to the South in the effort to establish race unity. He helped establish the first race unity conference in America. It was held in Chicago at that time. And though we are in awe of his contributions and sacrifices, he gave up his law practice in order to teach the faith and try to establish race unity. Because the Baha'i Faith started growing rapidly in the 60s and 70s in the South, this institute was built in 1972 and dedicated to his memory,
Yeah.
the Louis G. Gregory Baha'i Institute. And there's more about Mr. Gregory in the book, To Move the World.
Yeah.
I also want to talk about Mr. Woodrow Jackson.
Okay. All right, we can talk about him as well.
Mr. Woodrow Jackson is from here.
Okay.
He was living across the street from here.
Which is the Radio Baha'i station. So
Yes.
he lived across the street?
He lived across the
Wow.
street, and he walked over to the building site of the Institute from his house. He wanted to see what was going on,
Mm-hmm.
and he became the first local Baha'i.
Wow.
He regretted not being able to go to school and couldn't read, but he listened to tapes on the writings.
Mm.
He was very impressed with the suffering and wrongs inflicted on Baha'u'llah and would say Baha'u'llah suffered and that he is the same as the spirit of Jesus.
Mm.
He spoke graphically about his sufferings in prison for 40 years. He was also impressed with the Baha'i teachings of the equality of all men.
Mm.
He taught the faith throughout the surrounding area. Hence, most of his family became Baha'is.
Mm.
He attended the Baha'i Conference in St. Louis, Missouri in 1974, and he went to Grand Turk Island in the West Indies on a teaching trip.
Wow.
Mr. Jackson's daughter is Mary Beckman,
Mm.
and she was a cook at the Institute for many, many years, I think
Wow.
25 years, and
Wow.
they called her the singing cook.
Yeah.
And Nellie Hilton is his granddaughter.
Really?
Yes.
Wow, I did not know that.
So they are a 5-generation Baha'i family.
Wow.
That's why I wanted to talk about Mr. Jackson.
Wow, I did not know that. Do you have any experiences meeting Mr. Jackson?
I met him once near the end of his life.
Mm.
He was in a wheelchair.
Mm.
What I know about him and what I wrote about him, I learned from Trudy.
Okay.
Trudy and I spent a lot of time together. And when you have Alzheimer's or when you have any kind of memory issue,
Mm-hmm.
what the medical community says is you remember things way back
Right.
better than you remember things in the here and now.
Mm.
And so she remembered Mr. Jackson way back
Wow.
and talked about him.
Yeah. That's incredible. I mean, you when you think about that. I mean, but having a friend like Miss Trudy and having to like create this collage. I mean, can you talk to us a little bit about like that experience, like just being with a friend, and knowing, that they're dealing with that type of condition. Like how were you able to like kind of, I guess, continue to like try to stay encouraged to like, talk to her and like try to, make her remember certain things. Like what gave you the strength to do that?
Well, Trudy is a special case.
Mm.
And Trudy knew she had a condition, but she would laugh about it. Trudy had this laugh. Anybody who ever met Trudy, when Trudy came in the room and she laughed, everybody heard it. Everybody knew she had arrived. And one of the Baha'is who came to South Carolina she was born in Arkansas, but she came here from Alaska, was Celeste Havis. And Trudy lived with Celeste for a little while. And one story that Celeste told about Trudy was when they were going somewhere, Trudy would always ask, "Where's my pocketbook?" And so Celeste put a note on the visor in the car, and she would just pull down the visor so Trudy could read the note. And the note said, "You do not have a pocketbook." And then Trudy would laugh. So it wasn't really hard to be Trudy's friend, knowing that she had Alzheimer's. And I know that Alzheimer's affects different people different ways.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that it affected Trudy was, it was almost as if she had a little touch of it all her life. Because one of the stories about Trudy is she couldn't give directions.
Mm.
So what Trudy would say, Trudy, how do you get to the Institute? She gave one Baha'i directions to get to the Institute from Sumter when the person was leaving Florence. And when the person realized that she was coming from Sumter and turned those directions around, it made sense, but it made no sense. Or she would say, because I experienced this with Trudy, she would say, well, Miss Janie Snow is another Baha'i that lives in Neesmith, South Carolina. We were going to Miss Janie's house. Well, she lives near this big oak tree. Well, I mean, there's a lot of oak trees. And you get in the area and you see lots of oak trees. Well, she lives in a mobile home. Okay. There's a lot of mobile homes. But if you just let Trudy say, turn here, turn there, she always arrived at where she was going.
You know, somebody young gonna be listening to this right now, watching this. They're gonna be like, "What are they talking about? Why they just heard the GPS on?" But before,
There was no GPS.
yeah, no GPS at the time, so you really had to like listen and.
Well, even when you have GPS, you have to have an address.
Yeah, that's true.
So if you don't have an address, and then Trudy wouldn't have had an address, she just kind of knew where people were. and many people who contributed to the book referenced this quality of Trudy's, that she knew where the person was, but she couldn't tell you how to get where the person was. She and Miss Janie Snow, some people listening will remember Miss Janie Snow. She and Miss Janie Snow were friends for life. They had some things in common. They were both widows, and they both had children. They're both mothers. Miss Janie Snow was like a mother to the community, the New Smith black community probably.
Right.
She was a 4-H volunteer leader, and she loved gardening. And she and Trudy White loved visiting Baha'is around this area.
Yeah. I mean, so many amazing stories. But just to you personally, what drew you to Miss Trudy? How did like you all like just become friends? I mean, it seems like to me like you say she lights up a room, but what was it to you that kind of made you all have this this connection?
Trudy had an ability to figure out what the connection would be between you and her. Rather than look at how we are different, Trudy would look for how we are the same. Like she and Miss Janie Snow were both widows.
Right.
Well, I wasn't a widow, but she found something that made me like her. She had a daughter named Annette. So I became her daughter. In fact, her sons Philip and Fred accepted me as their sister now.
Wow.
She and her daughter Nancy, who's now passed away, also we were sisters. So she had a daughter named Annette, and my name was Annette. So then now we have a connection, and now she's my mama and I'm her daughter.
Yeah.
Okay. And she just had that way about herself that she would find the connection between you and her.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we could all cultivate. And I try.
Yeah.
I try. Because human beings kind of tend to look at what's different.
Yeah.
And we're more human than we anything.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about, if we're talking about differences, it would be cultural. It wouldn't be race, because it's a human race. I mean, there aren't races, there are human race.
Yeah.
We're all a human race.
Yeah. I think about that. You know, I grew up in New Orleans, and where I grew up, they had probably 98 to almost 100% black. I would go like months at a time before I see anybody of any other culture. And once I started to get older, I noticed like when I get around like, people of different culture, Hispanic, white, I would be like socially awkward. I wouldn't know how to like talk to them, interact with them or anything like that. It wasn't until like, honestly, I went to HBCU and once I graduated, I started to like go out into the world and I started to like really see other cultures. And I feel like working here at Radio Baha'i, working with Mr. Greg Kentz, meeting his wife, Miss Jenny Kentz, it kind of like helped me kind of open up. Like, because I was one of those individuals that learned about the cultures through television and stuff like that. Because, I didn't really have too many interactions with them. So once you like really open up and you learn, like you said, we're all one people. Like, we're all just a part of the human race. And I look at Mr. Greg Kent like a father figure to me. Everything that I've learned, like in the world of broadcasting, he kind of helped me with that. So it's always like just amazing to like be able to like open up and just fully understand like, other cultures understand like pretty much we're all the same. Like, yeah, we're different on the outside, the way that we're, may look, but on the inside, like I said, we're all, wanting to express ourselves, like, and show like love for one another, and and work towards equality. And I mean, it's just amazing, you meet so many different people, and you realize like your whole life, there was an opportunity for you to actually take these steps, but it just never like presented themselves. So you felt like you was, me personally, I felt I was a little bit afraid to, because of some of the things that I've seen, or some of the things that I've heard about, but I mean, it's once you figure it out and learn for yourself, I mean, it's a completely different ball game. Did you ever have like any experiences like that, like growing up?
Well, it's interesting that you should ask that question. I was raised in a segregated society. Now, we don't call our society segregated now, but it can be. What was black and white communities, the black communities remain black communities. Okay, so anyone living in what was a black community may be experiencing exactly what you experienced. But what happened to me was my parents and grandparents are graduates of South Carolina State University, which is in Orangeburg. So they sent me to South Carolina State University. I wanted to go to the University of Hawaii, but my daddy said my money would be at State College. So that's where I wound up. And if any of you get a chance to read the book Orangeburg Massacre, I witnessed the Orangeburg Massacre.
Wow.
So I had that was the first time I felt like there was something wrong, that there was a problem with race in America, because when you get raised in a black community, you get told that you just as good as everybody else.
Right.
You don't get told that that there are white people who don't like you.
Yeah.
Because the adults in the community don't want you to feel less than.
Right.
So we want our children to grow up feeling that they can do whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
Okay. So what happened is I did a not wise thing. I got married too young, and my husband and I moved to his hometown, which was Gaffney, South Carolina. And after the massacre, he said I couldn't go back to State College because it was too dangerous. Well, that wasn't his reason, and that's a whole nother story. But his father said, well, why don't you go to Limestone College? Well, I didn't know what Limestone College was. I had never heard of Limestone College. I'd never been to Gaffney. It turns out he was making a joke at my expense. Limestone was a previously all-white college, and he did not think I could go to Limestone. He just said that as a joke.
Wow.
Well, I did go to Limestone because it was 1968. Civil rights law was passed in 1965.
Right.
Of course, there were a lot of instances of schools having trouble integrating.
Right.
Limestone did not have that problem. Limestone's board of trustees decided that they were going to integrate in December 1967.
Wow.
I applied in March of 1968.
Look at it.
And I went back to state after the massacre that semester,
Right.
but it wasn't the same. So I think when my husband said he didn't want me to go back, I kind of agreed with him, maybe subconsciously, because it wasn't the same.
Right.
Because now I had my eyes open to racism. So I applied. They accepted me, and I was the first African American to graduate from Limestone College.
Wow.
When I got to the campus, that's when I found out that I was going to be the only black person there. And that was a bit of a culture shock.
Yeah. Okay, so for people that may not be from the South Carolina area that may be viewing this, can you talk to us a little bit about the Orangeburg Massacre, what exactly that was, for those that may not know?
Sure. There was an attempt to integrate a bowling alley in Orangeburg. Orangeburg is 62% black. There are two colleges in Orangeburg, South Carolina State University and Claflin University. Claflin University is a Methodist-based college. And, of course, there's a technical school.
Right.
So the more black people than white people in Orangeburg.
Right.
There was an attempt to integrate a bowling alley in 1968. Actually, there was an attempt to integrate that bowling alley sometime in the 50s, I've been told, but I don't remember the dates.
Okay.
So that attempt was stopped by the police, and the students that were trying that attempt were beaten and came back to the campus. All of them got back to the campus, okay, and we had an infirmary on campus, okay. So the football players asked the coach at the time if they could join the Black Awareness Coordinating Committee.
Right.
And the coach said they could do whatever they felt they wanted to do.
Right.
He wasn't going to tell them that they had to. He wasn't going to tell them not to. So the next attempt to integrate the bowling alley included a number of football players. The police got the worst of that one because they were football players. This is my assessment of what happened. I was on campus. I knew nothing about the Black Awareness Coordinating Committee. I knew nothing about the integration of the bowling alley. I was just going to school as a student.
Were you a freshman, sophomore?
No, I was a sophomore.
Oh, sophomore. Okay. Right.
Because I didn't know there was racism, actually. Whenever I asked my parents about things the answer was racism. For instance, we traveled a good deal, and we carried our food with us, and my daddy wouldn't stop to go to the bathroom. Well, we carried food because my daddy had diabetes. And he didn't want to stop because he wanted to get there fast. I mean, it didn't have anything to do with the fact that black people couldn't do that.
Right.
Okay. So the second attempt, the police, they didn't get hurt, but the police couldn't stop this effort because the football players were involved. So the students came back to the campus, and the National Guard was called out.
Wow.
You see, the football players fought back. I wasn't there, so I'm telling you what I heard. But I do know that the football players were involved. Okay. So the football players, so everybody came back, and the National Guard was called out, not to protect the students, but to protect the city, the white people, from the students. So National Guard in front of the campus, there's a railroad track in front of the campus, and they were milling up and down the railroad track. I don't know how many, a lot of them. Let's say there were 100 of them, because there were a lot of them.
Wow.
Okay. So on the evening that the massacre happened, we were told not to go off the campus.
Right.
Well, that meant front campus. Back campus was in the black neighborhood. So we could go off back campus, but we couldn't go off front campus, which is where we would have gone to the bowling alley.
Right.
So there was a hill, no longer there. There was a hill, and there was some steep steps that went down the hill. So that was right at the front campus. That was as far as you could go on campus and still be on campus. We're talking about college students. We're talking about 18, 19, 20-year-old people.
Right.
And they're going to go as far as they can go, right to the edge of campus. And they decided to build a bonfire and roast hot dogs. Right there at that edge of campus. Okay. I'm sure nobody, black or white, would have thought there was going to be a massacre. I'm sure of that because I've talked to white people since that were as sure as we were that nothing like that could ever happen. So let me just say that. Okay. So they built a bonfire. A fire truck was called. The fire truck came with sirens. I'm standing across the street from where the hill is. I'm not standing on the hill. Mostly guys are standing on the hill. I lived off campus because I was married. And the campus had closed, the dormitories for the women had closed at 10 o'clock. And it was after 10 o'clock, so they were mostly guys standing on the hill. And I was not standing on the hill. I was waiting for one of those football players to walk me home because I had stayed at the library late, and I was a majorette.
Okay.
And I was a twirler at State. And, of course, the football players were very protective of their majorette. So I had 2 football players actually going to walk me home.
Right.
One of them stayed with me across the street, and the other one went across the street to see what was happening because, of course, the football players were involved.
Right.
And the students fell back. I watched this. The students fell back as the fire truck came. When they realized it was a fire truck, they went forward. And what you see, I had never seen this before, but anybody that's been in the military will recognize what you see is people raising their guns and light coming out of the guns, people falling down, and then a big boom.
Wow.
Because, they say if you get shot, you don't hear it. You don't. The shot is faster than the sound.
Wow.
So this is what I saw. And this is what I realized, what it is. I couldn't imagine. When I realized I was running, I was already running. You see that, and it just happens. So I went to one of the dormitories, and they let me in. And we sat up all night in the dormitory because there are cases of mobs of white people burning down whole towns. Tulsa.
Right.
I'm writing now about my family, and just in a little research, I found there's so many cases of that across the United States, not just in the South. This is not a Southern problem.
Right.
So we sat up thinking, but that's when I heard about Tulsa. I heard about Tulsa that night. We sat up thinking they would come and burn down the dormitory. We didn't know what was going to happen. It didn't happen. 3 students died. One of those was a football player that was supposed to walk me home.
Wow.
And 27 were injured, were shot.
Wow.
And that was it. I mean, there was the one firing. Then highway patrolman kept firing because then you heard pop, 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 pop. And those 8 highway patrolmen did go to court, but they were given suspended sentences. And you can read all of this in the book, The Orangeburg Massacre, because it was called a riot on the night that it happened, February 8th, 1968, at 10:25. On the night that it happened, it was called a riot by the students. And a white man, Jack Black, wrote the book, Orangeburg Massacre, and then it was called the massacre. And I participated in an interfaith program in Columbia. One of the people that was going to do the program was a journalist, and he was there that night. And he was over there where the National Guard was. And when I understood that he was going to come and talk about it, I really thought he was not going to tell the truth. And so I asked, could I attend the program?
Right.
And would I be able to speak? And what happened is he called me and said, let's do it together.
Yeah.
And I want you to tell what it felt like on your side, and I'll tell what it felt like on my side. And that's one of the reasons why I know that no white person thought that could have happened. Because he said 1 minute everything was fine, and the next minute people were shooting from his side. And he said not to make it, and there was no excuse for it. Okay. And there was nobody said fire. Somebody said somebody got shot. No policeman went to the hospital. So far as we know, no policeman got shot. And I know the students didn't have guns.
Right.
After the massacre, some of the students did go get guns and come to the dormitories to try to protect the girls. But there were no guns that night, out there. So there was the firing came from the police side. I also found out that there was a similar massacre at Mississippi State. 2 years later, maybe. And there was shooting of students, but they were white students.
At Kent State around the same time.
Kent State.
Kent State at the same time. So
Kent State got a lot of publicity,
Yep.
and Jackson State didn't get a publicity, and South Carolina State didn't get the publicity. And at the time, you could drive through South Carolina State also.
Yeah.
They put up speed bumps and gates and stuff now.
Yeah.
But at the time, you could drive through.
Yeah. But now, I mean, there have been a lot of renovations, Ms. Annette, like at Jackson State. But when I was there, the dormitory that the policemen shot up, they actually kept the bullet holes inside of the metal, as just a reminder. And they called the plaza where the kids like congregate or walk in between classes. They call it the Gibbs Green Plaza, named after those two gentlemen. But yeah, I mean, but do you ever just think about so many like historical moments that you've been a part of, like, you know, what happened at South Carolina State, and then being the first African American to graduate from Limestone College? Like, do you just think about that and just say, you know, I've been a part of history, you know? I mean, the Orangeburg Massacre is something I know you didn't want to be a part of, but do you ever just think about, I was a part of that and I made a little bit of history myself?
I think one of the things I'll talk about the massacre in a minute, but one of the things I think is there was no plan for me to integrate anything. My parents were not involved in integration at all. My parents had a business, and 70% of it was white. My parents sent a lot of money to the NAACP, and that's it. So there was no plan for me to integrate Limestone College. That was God's plan.
Yeah.
Had to be God's plan.
Yeah, it had to be.
And for my father-in-law to make this joke, and then it turned out.
To make you a part of history, look. Unbeknownst to him.
Exactly. And for me to, at South, I wouldn't say that South Carolina State and Limestone, there's one that's better than the other. They are different.
Yeah.
Just like cultures are different. They're just different.
Yeah.
In fact, if my son was here, he would tell the audience, and I don't think he can hear this, but anyway, if my son was here, he would tell the audience that I was the one in the 101, the marching 101 at South Carolina State University, because I was the only majorette twirler. Okay, so that's a bit of so-called history that my son loves to talk about.
Hey,
but anyway,
I can understand why.
I think for me to experience seeing, because everybody that was on the hill, everybody that was on the campus, all the black people in the city, some of the white people, I'm sure, because the person that was in charge of the National Guard told me, crying, that he was so sorry. And that was sometime in the 80s that I met him. And he was white. So for me to witness that, and then wind up at a white college and be accepted, be welcomed, have people around me who made sure I was welcome, because the administration said, we are accepting African-American students and they will feel welcome. And I was.
Yeah.
Well, that's God.
Yeah.
That's God talking.
I did not know I was talking to a pioneer right now. But I mean, we talk about some of those things, and we talk about like history, you know, Black history, and I want to get to this.
Okay.
The Black History Month, the Baha'i community of Florence, Concerned Citizens Association of North Florence. Talk to us a little bit about that organization. I mean, the name pretty much speaks for itself.
Yes,
but
North Florence was the black community when I was growing up. Now, there are a number of black people who now live in West Florence, and that is also called the black community now. I don't know. When I was growing up, I only knew about North Florence. When I was growing up, there were places you could go and places you couldn't go.
Right.
So all the places I could go were in North Florence.
Right.
Okay. So the North Florence concerned citizens are concerned about making North Florence better.
Right.
Any way we can, mostly through youth. We're trying to work with youth, but we're working with everybody and having different kinds of programs. I know last year, a year before last, we had a program for families affected by gun violence. So this program, similarly, is a program that's going to highlight the arts. And so there's going to be several workshops on the arts during the day, because that's a week when the children are out of school. And after they participate in these different workshops, they will be given a program. We'll serve a meal at 5:30. The workshops start at 2. We will end the workshops at 5. We'll have a meal at 5:30 and a program. And we will have, part of the program is the youth teaching us what they learned from the workshops, from the various workshops.
Yeah, I mean, the Community Empowerment Center, I had the opportunity to go there. We had a meeting for the station one time. I mean, it's a wonderful place, and you can tell it's a safe haven for a lot of people as well. You take a lot of pride in it. And like I said, it's the Black History Month program, February 22nd. It's going to be from 2 p.m. to 7:30 at the Community Empowerment Center. That's 1113 Oakland Avenue in Florence, South Carolina. So, guys, a lot of activities that you can take a part in from 2 to 7:30. So make sure that you all come on out and, and fellowship, work and do some arts and crafts here, some workshops.
One of them is photography. One of them is on photography.
Oh, okay, photography as well. Look,
dance is another one.
Let's see, we got dance, we got photography, we got drama, spoken word. So some amazing activities that they can be a part of. Whose idea was this? Like a collaborative? I'm pretty sure it was a collaborative effort. Whose idea was to kind of create this workshop?
Well, we have a center support team, and the center support team is composed of Baha'is and community members. And the center support team came up with this, as well as the other programs that we've done.
I always look forward to it. Like I said, I had the opportunity to interview you all when you did the Out for Gun Violence. Was able to talk to you all a little bit about that. I mean, you all do amazing things, and I know the city of Florence is very appreciative of that. I know we are here, and everything that you do. But also, I want to talk about your book. If somebody wanted to get a copy of the book to learn a little bit more about Miss Trudy and some of the things that was written inside of the book, how can they get in touch with you?
Amazon. You can get the book on Amazon.
Okay. Yeah, you got to make sure that you check it out. Once again, Trudy and the Baha'i Spiritual Path in South Carolina. Miss Annette Reynolds, thank you so much. Always a pleasure. Learn something new about you every single time. That's why I get so much pleasure interviewing you. Thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it.
Happy to be of service.
All right. This is 90.9 FM. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, Miss Annette Reynolds.